Hello YouTube, and welcome back to another alternate history video. And today we got the 1976 presidential election, which of course was held between incumbent President Gerald Ford and Democrat Jimmy Carter. However, in this alternate scenario, I got George Wallace as a candidate who ran for president a few times, ran as an independent in 1968, as I've talked about before, and won a few southern states in that election, and like I said, ran as a Democrat a couple more times after, but wasn't successful in getting the nomination. But like I said, in this alternate scenarios, if I do get him as a nominee. Now, I did do a video before with him and Nixon in 1972, so this is kind of like a repeat almost, but just with Ford. So it could be pretty similar to the map ahead in the 72 prediction, but we'll just get into it. Now, of course, in 1976, you had stagflation of the economy, Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon, which didn't go over well with a lot of voters, and Carter was able to get a narrow victory. However, I don't know if Wallace, he would definitely have the southern appeal like Carter did. Excuse me. Like I said, Wallace would definitely have that southern appeal, while Ford could appeal everywhere else pretty good. And maybe Wallace could still win some northeastern states like Carter did, since they were trending blue around this time and are solid blue today. But we'll just get into this. Now, Ford, I'm sure, will still win the same states like it did in the actual scenario, like the Mountain West, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah. He'd probably win the West Coast pretty well. Washington, Oregon, California might be a close one, but it was like a lean red state back then, so I believe it was stick with Ford, as well as Nevada, Colorado, the Great Plains states of Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Arizona, New Mexico, Alaska. However, Wallace could maybe win Hawaii because Carter did, but I think it could be a close one. But since Hawaii has been a traditionally blue state for years, and Carter did win it, I think it would actually go Wallace in a narrow victory. And here in the Deep South, I believe it would go for him, like Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, states he won in 1968, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. I believe Kentucky would go for him, and did go for Carter. South Carolina, North Carolina. Oklahoma could be a close one, but it did go to Gerald Ford, because I believe Tulsa probably helped him, so I think it would stick with Ford in a close one. I did give it to Wallace, I believe, in my 72 prediction, but honestly, it didn't, like I said, it didn't go for Carter, so it still went with Ford, so I believe it would go for him narrowly, but I believe, like I said, it would be a close one. Now, Florida's definitely going to be a close one, because Wallace would do good, like in the Panhandle, and Ford would do better like in Miami-Dade and the I-4 corridor. And since Florida typically votes for incumbents, I think it would actually go Ford in this case. I mean, it could still go Wallace because they actually did vote for Carter in the actual scenario. Like I said, I think it would be a nail-biter. But honestly, I might actually give it to Wallace, like I said, because of the southern appeal. And like I said, I did go for Carter. And since since Ford was kind of getting unpopular at this time, I could see it going for Wallace, because Wallace actually did win in the 72 primary, so I'm actually going to give it to him. But I believe it would be a close one. Now, Missouri, I think would go Ford, because I don't think Wallace had much competition there, because I believe in 1968 he did get decent support, but I believe only won like one county. And even though the state did go Carter, but since Wallace didn't get a lot of support here, I believe it would actually go Ford in this scenario, as well as these other Midwestern states like Iowa. I believe Illinois, Indiana would be pretty solid for Ford. However, West Virginia was a more Democratic state back then, with coal miners and the working class supporting Democrats, so I believe Wallace could do pretty well here and actually win it like Carter did. However, my home state, Virginia, I believe Wallace could do well in the rural parts, but as far as Northern Virginia goes, I believe it would edge out Ford. Now, Carter did win Ohio. It was a narrow contest. I don't know if Wallace would have that same appeal in the state. I honestly kind of doubt it, because I believe, of course, like I said, his strength would be in the Deep South. I don't think he really had that same appeal like Carter did, so I actually believe it could go Ford in a close contest, as well as his home state of Michigan did go for him. And Carter actually did win Wisconsin in 1976, but like I said, I don't know if Wallace would have that same appeal in this region. I think he maybe could win it, but I don't know. If I had to go with my gut, I think Ford would probably be a little more favored in this region, so I will give it to him. However, Minnesota is a different story, because Carter won it by a solid margin and has gone Democrat since this year of 1976. Since it did go for Carter by a pretty solid margin, I believe it would still go for George Wallace because he could have pretty decent support in the Minneapolis suburbs. He probably will regress a little bit, but I think since it was still solid for Carter, I believe it would go Wallace since it has been solid for Democrats since his time. Now, Pennsylvania, however, did go for Carter, but like I said, I don't think Wallace would actually have that same appeal in this region. I mean, it could be pretty decent, and since Ford was getting low on popular, it could probably stay with Wallace, but like I said, the strength would definitely be in the South more than with these other regions. So I actually think Ford could pull out Pennsylvania in a narrow victory, but you can give your thoughts below whether you agree with that or not. But I think it could narrowly go Ford, and that does put him over the top at 279. Now, New York did go for Jimmy Carter as a New York City, and of course it's been a blue state for years now ever since that time. Of course, it went for Reagan both times, I believe, but it did go for Carter, and I could see Wallace possibly doing decent. So I might actually give it to him because of New York City, but I believe it could be a narrow one like it was in the actual scenario. Now, these other states here in the Northeast, Vermont and New Hampshire were solid, moderate Republican states back then, so I believe Ford would still get them, as well as all of Maine, like it did in the actual scenario. Now, Massachusetts, however, has always been a very liberal state for years now. It was these states did go for Republicans sometimes, but they were more trending blue like they are now today. So I believe it would still go George Wallace since it went for Carter. Now, Rhode Island, I believe it did go for Carter. It did by a solid margin. However, so like I said, I think Wallace could still win it since Carter did win it by a solid margin, but I believe he would regress some. Now, Connecticut, however, did go for Ford. It was more of a moderate Republican state like Vermont and New Hampshire back then, so I believe that would stick with Ford. Now, New Jersey was a Ford state, so I believe it would stay with him. I believe Delaware went for Carter. Let me check. It did, so since it did go for Carter, it probably would go Wallace, as well as Maryland, because Wallace actually won Maryland in 72 primary. He had pretty good appeal here, so I believe it would go him. Now, and D.C. as well. And here's my final map with Gerald Ford actually winning 315 to George Wallace's 222. Now, you could say Pennsylvania could go for Wallace still, and maybe New York could go for Ford, but like I said, I'm not really sure. But if I had to go with my gut instinct, I think this is the way it would go. Like I said, you can give your thoughts below on whether you think it would go that way or not. But I just think my gut instinct it probably would go this way. Because like I said, Wallace's strengths would definitely be like in the Deep South and more than it would in these regions. But like I said, if you agree, disagree, just comment below. I thank you for watching. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you haven't yet. And I'll see you next time.